Hello, I am Jorge from Ordinary Folk, and this is our Whole Frame Workshop.
So Jorge, it's funny seeing you here. I wanted to start by asking you about why you said yes to this project. This is actually a pretty interesting workshop because we are the client and you are the studio that produced this for us. And when I asked you if Ordinary Folk would make our manifesto video, I was hoping you would say yes, and thank goodness you did. But I'm curious on your end, you probably understood at some level that School Motion wasn't going to be able to pay the full rate. So what was it about the project that made you say, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to really go all out and kill it?
Well, I mean, first, thank you for this opportunity. It's kind of fun to go back and dig into how we did things. It's been quite a learning process, so it's been helpful for us too. But yeah, I think that's a very valid question. And I think when I was trying to think of the answer for that, I mean, in some ways, it's like, why did we even say yes? But at the time, it didn't even seem like a question. It was just like, yeah, we got to do this. And there's two things really that come to mind. And one of them is that, we're familiar with School of Motion. I've helped Sunder. We did the sequence intro together, which was a lot of fun. But more importantly, I think we all internally as a team, we realized that School of Motion is kind of like this school that is really trying to better the community in many ways and bring in real talent with experience to kind of really just push the whole industry in terms of the education level higher. So in that sense, there was a personal investment for us because we're even myself personally with Blend and One After Coffee, there's a part of me that always wants to help with whatever school, whatever program, whoever is trying to make the industry better as a whole. So that was the first thing. The other one is that we had worked together, and one of the hardest and most uncertain things with clients is the level of trust that you will be given to or you will not be given to. And since we had worked together and because you kind of get the process, in a way that trust was given from day one because there was already that existing relationship, which is huge. We knew that you would be down to go as crazy as we wanted to go crazy. And that's a huge creative opportunity. So that creative freedom and that level of trust and also a project that would help the industry as a whole, it kind of, made a no-brainer independent of the budget, even though, the budget definitely had part of the conversation, but those two things with this project or other projects usually overpower the budgets, even if they don't cover the full cost.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. So I have a couple of questions, and we don't have to get too specific, but I think it might be helpful for people watching this to get some idea of how big the gap was between what the actual budget was and what it would have been had, say, Google asked for the exact same thing. So do you have any sense of sort of, in my head, my guess is the budget would have needed to be at least 4 to 5 times bigger for it to make sense for Google, and the level of probably back and forth that would have been required for something like that. But I'm curious what your sense is as far as the gap between what we actually ended up spending on it versus what you would charge a bigger client.
Yeah, I think obviously this project was treated differently because it's not those big companies. But if we were to say when the Googles or the big companies come and ask us how much this School of Motion project costs and how many hours, we give them the real numbers, not what we actually charge. So we keep track of all the hours that we do internally, all the hours that freelancers have spent, and obviously different rates and so on. But our goal for this project was if we break even, if we make zero profit, basically, we'll be fine, right? Because this is a huge creative opportunity, and we don't do that very often. We do that, once or a project every year or something like that. So we almost hit it break even. We probably went over putting our own resources probably about 20%, which means the project was probably about 60-70% under budget. Because we in order to that's just paying people. We have to consider everything else that considers a studio and then profit So our ideal goal for any project is to make at least between 40 and 60% profit. Usually ends around 40, 50. And that's, to cover everything and like running the studio and all these things. So it's not full profit, but that's kind of like our range that we aim for every project. And in this case, you could say that we ended about, I think it would be safe to say that we ended half. Like we would charge twice as much for a Google, like considering everything involved, maybe even 3 times.
Yeah, that's about what I figured. So then let's talk about, I guess, your goals when you took this on. I mean, you sort of already talked about, and by the way, thank you for saying all the nice things about School of Motion. And that's the reason I came to you, is because I knew that you got what we were trying to do. And so there's kind of this community, like we're trying to lift up the community aspect of it. But also, at the time when we approached you, Ordinary Folk was still a pretty new studio. And so I was also hoping that you saw it as an opportunity, and I think I might have even said this in the email, like, I want you to do your thing. I want you to kind of just show off, because this is kind of the perfect vehicle to do that. And I was hoping that there was value there too. So can you talk about, from a studio owner perspective, how important that is to get an opportunity to just, try and hit a home run, on every single shot and show off a little bit, which on client projects you're not often able to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk a little bit about like just the client project, because that's what normally we do like on every project. And it's like, what is, in terms of like the goal, before we get to the goal of the studio personally, is like our first question with every project in some ways is of what's your goal? Like ultimately this video, even though we want to put everything from our own into it, ultimately it's your video. And like, it's kind of like we need to grab your brain, put it on ours, and try to figure out things that way while trying to see things from different perspectives. So I don't know if you might remember how we went through the little questionnaire that we sent you way back when we started. And it was something that we do for every project, even now. Obviously, the questions have evolved, and we actually don't use Dropbox paper anymore. We've evolved to Notion. But like in many ways, like the first question is like the most important. It's like we asked you to describe what the project is, what the goal of the project is. And you said, create a brand manifesto to inspire potential students to learn more about our industry and about School of Motion. And that's kind of like all these different answers that you gave us were like the things that started to define what we wanted from the project, based on like, so that the goals don't really clash, basically. So like, we don't have to go through all this, but like this questionnaire has become really, really helpful, especially when you do direct to client projects, like what you don't want it to be. And you were like, well, we don't want it to be explaining about what School of Motion does or how it works. So it's like, great. Who's the audience? Pretty much everybody that's excited about motion graphics. Okay, get it. Where will this video be, and so on? What is the outcome? Like if someone ends watching the video, what do you want them to do? And it can be as simple as what you have. Visit the website to learn more. And this very broad ideas were like, okay, these are the goalposts. This is how we'll measure if the video is successful at the end or not. And then more specifically, it was like, what are the emotions and the adjectives that you would describe for the work? And it's like, oh, inspirational, excited. I was like, I want to be able to make something like this. And like those keywords were like, okay, now that we know what the client wants, and we know why we said yes to this project, like, okay, now why, what's our goals as a studio? And I think like many other projects, and Giant Ant and the Bucks and other, like they all have like this 3 categories. Like, is it basically creatively fulfilling? Is it good for the business? Like, is it monetary? And is it something that we believe in, that we would do even if it was free? And obviously, if there's only one of those things, it's a pretty easy no. If there's 2, then you have a much more clear conversation, because you will have to sacrifice one of those aspects. And then if the 3 of them are there, it's a resounding yes. In this case, because the budget wasn't ideal, we were focusing, okay, this is going to be one, yes, creatively fulfilling, because we'll have pretty much creative freedom. But in terms of like how it would be good for the studio and why we wanted to do it, is because like this is kind of the kind of projects that we want to do more. And in that sense, it was a no-brainer. It's like, if we do a project like this is the kind of project that we want to do. This is the clients that we like working with, like where there's like a very direct relationship, client with agency or production studio. Like there's no in between middleman, there's no agency, there's no rep. Like this is the kind of projects that we love doing, and like we have to do this because this is in a way our way of creating work that we want to do more of. So in that sense, that was our goal. Like let's make something awesome that we're really proud of, so that we can do more projects like this in the future.
That's beautiful, man. And it reminds me of like the way that we used to say it at the studio I used to run. It was, you can do it for the rate, for the real, or for the relationship. And you need two of those. And so that kind of makes sense. I mean, and I think that that's actually really good advice for anyone, whether you're running a studio or you're freelancing. There's like a lot of discussion in our industry sometimes about doing things for less than your full rate and giving people a break on price and stuff like that. And I think that this project is an example of one where a lot of things lined up where it just became a win-win. And so I guess my last question before we actually start diving into the production of this is, I want to know if you felt like the goals that you set for your studio were achieved. Were you hoping maybe you'd win a Motion Award for this or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why it's so important for us to kind of like set the goals both from from the client and ours in the beginning of our project, so we can actually measure that. Because if it's purely by emotion or by gut, then it's really hard to measure the success or failure of a video. Like, oh yeah, I thought the video, like if you were to just ask me like without my business brain on, it was like, oh, what do you think of the motion piece? It was like, oh, it was one of my favorite pieces to animate. But that doesn't really answer if it accomplished its goal, neither from the client or from the studio. Like it's just like a personal feeling of the piece, which is not something that at the end of the day matters too much. So I think once we have those questions at the very beginning, or those definitions at the very beginning of what the goal should be, then we can ask at the end. It was like, all right, so if your goal was to create a video that gets people excited about the industry and wants to learn about motion design and School of Motion, like this video do that? And I'd say, yes, it does that. Like, I think if I were to just put it on top of a student that is learning, I think they'll get excited about motion design and want to learn more about School of Motion. So I think I'd say that's a check. And then the other one is internally as a studio, like it was quite an opportunity as a new studio to put a video out there that we were proud of. And like, we're still kind of like just starting to get into like the realm of the great studios and starting to kind of like put our little toes in there. It was like, this was a great opportunity to get more deep in there. Did we create something we're proud of and something that betters the industry, which were our, personal goals? And I think, yes, like looking back, it was nice looking back to this project because it's been over a year now and seeing the full piece again. It's like, hey, this is actually cool. Like I'm proud of this project. Like I might see a million flaws and I can still think that many things could have been better. But as a general rule, I think is one of the strongest pieces that we've done as a studio. So in that sense, yes, we accomplished our goals.